reach out to the public of Cape Breton, to the general public, and get their opinions on exactly what you're doing. They have a say, Mr. Speaker. They have a say in the process which has been overlooked. Agreed with the Minister of Education, the University Board of Governors has a wide representation of the community at large in Cape Breton. That doesn't mean they're perfect, I would suggest to the Minister of Education. It means that they're as fallible as anybody else. What I'm suggesting here is that the general public was not consulted enough in this decision. And it's easy, Mr. Speaker, it's very easy. I'm sure members in this House have gone through days where they didn't pay much attention to what was happening in the media or whatever, and perhaps you didn't hear a particular story. You showed up in the legislature the next day and you said, I wasn't aware of that happening. I didn't hear about that. Well, when the university decides one day in one or two newspapers to publish 3 choices, I'm sure a lot of people weren't aware of that. I know for a fact that a lot of people were not aware that the name Breton was even being considered. I know that because they've told me that. They said, we thought there were only 2 choices, University of Cape Breton or Cape Breton University. We would have been happy with either one. If either one of those had been chosen, we wouldn't be here discussing this right now, Mr. Speaker. It would have moved through in one of the quickest debates you've ever seen in all your life in the legislature to rename it. But instead, Mr. Speaker, what we're left is another controversial matter, another controversial bill before this legislature. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, I take great exception to the members of this legislature who have come to me and said, listen, you've got better things to worry about. You've got bigger fish to fry. You've got more important things that you should be talking about than a name change at the University College of Cape Breton. That's not true, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure there are other things that are as important that I could be talking about. But right now, I don't think there's anything as important as changing this name that I could be standing here right now and talking about to you. And I'll continue to do so, Mr. Speaker. It is, I agree, it's only a name. It's only a name. But, Mr. Speaker, you have to remember, each one of us, I know, has a great deal of pride in where we came from. And you have to remember where you come from, Mr. Speaker. And if we just turn our backs on the fact that an institution that is held in such high regard in Cape Breton is about to be named with a generic name such as Breton University, which in no way reflects the rich heritage of that island or its people in full. It does not in full. We have to remember, Mr. Speaker, that we have to stand up and we have to be accounted for to the people who put us here in the first place. And that's what they're telling me. Mr. Speaker, there have been a large number of letters and so on that have been sent to the Cape Breton Post, and let me table one for you here today in the legislature. Let me read it first of all. It was a letter to the Cape Breton Post on Saturday, September 25th of this year, and the heading of that letter was called University Name Without Place Disappointing. The letter is from David Ferguson of Glace Bay, and it reads, "It was with disappointment that I heard the name for University College of Cape Breton, Breton University. My wife is an alumnus and former Caper athlete. I have friends, nieces, nephews who are graduates or students of UCCB. Although not a graduate myself of UCCB, I have taken courses towards my degrees, attended events, and supported athletes and programs there whenever possible. Having watched UCCB grow over the years and seeing what it represents, I find that it is beyond my imagination why Cape Breton would be removed from the name. President John Harker is right about leading Cape Breton in economic recovery, but he quickly leaves out the most important thing of all, Cape Breton. Most people with Cape Breton roots understand the concept of UCCB and are willing to drop the college portion of the name, but not the Cape portion. Mr. Ferguson goes on to say, as I travel, I am proud to be from Cape Breton. It defines who we are. Breton does not. The argument for a shorter name for marketing makes no sense when you think of such institutions as St. Francis Xavier, SMU, UBC, and why not UCB or CBU? It would easily alleviate the president of the hardship of explaining to his world colleagues that UCB is a university. The letter writer goes on to state that Professor Mary Keating is quoted as saying that Breton sounds like a nice name. I hope this is an edited view and that she gave it more thought. And I and many people I know take offense to dropping the Cape Breton name. I read that this was a unanimous decision of the Board of Governors, so it's unfortunate that not one board member is proud enough to see the importance of keeping Cape Breton in the name. And in closing, Mr. Ferguson says, I will give the board credit in adopting the black and gray colors to represent the steel and coal industries which built our communities. There are many proud Cape Breton miners and steel workers who deserve this, but they and the majority of proud Cape Bretoners will remember the Cape Breton coal mines and steel plant. They don't remember the Breton mines or the Breton steel plant. And as I promised at the first, Mr. Speaker, I will table that. Mr. Speaker, and to those wondering that the change is not an actual change in colors, they introduced a motion to change as a background to the existing colors, steel and gray. Why did they do that, Mr. Speaker? Why did they do that? They did that because they wanted to attach the heritage of the community to the university. The heritage of coal mines, the heritage of steel plants, and of working people. Attach that to the university. But at the same time, rip from the name Cape Breton. Now, Mr. Speaker, in all due respect to the Board of Governors and President John Harker, do you get it? Do you really get it? If you're going to honor an institution such as the University College of Cape Breton, and you're going to honor a community, surrounding communities of Sydney, Glace Bay, New Waterford, Dominion, proud communities, Inverness, North Sydney, Sydney Mines. If you're going to honor those communities, then leave the name Cape Breton attached to one of the things that we take the most pride in, which is the university, Mr. Speaker. Which is the university. This is not a matter of, as a member for Timberley Prospect said, this is not the matter of renaming a high school or renaming an individual school. Those are named for certain reasons too, Mr. Speaker. And they're named to honor sometimes former principals. They're named to honor communities. There's more to it than that, Mr. Speaker. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the word Breton, the name Breton Education Centre and why it was named, or Glace Bay High School, or Riverview High School, or Sydney Academy, Queen Elizabeth High, Halifax West. There's nothing wrong with those names. And there's nothing wrong with Cape Breton staying a part of the university in Cape Breton. Absolutely nothing wrong. So what puzzles me the most, Mr. Speaker, in all of this debate, what puzzles me the most is how can, I hate to pick on one particular party, I really do. I don't think this should ever go into a political debate, Mr. Speaker. As I said, to me, this is an emotional debate. I'm not making it political. But when members of the New Democratic Party have fully endorsed forgetting about Cape Breton for the rest of their lives, then I wonder why. What has happened? I don't know. But I do call, Mr. Speaker, I do call upon, and I'll be quite forthright with this, I do call upon my fellow colleagues here in this legislature from all parties who are colleagues from Cape Breton. I do call upon them to give this very, very serious consideration, Mr. Speaker. And I ask them to take the next few days, because this matter will be back for this matter. It doesn't matter what caucus they're in. They're in my caucus, the NDP caucus, or the Tory caucus. I don't care. I'm calling upon my Cape Breton colleagues to give this very, very serious consideration over the next few days, and to think about what's happening, Mr. Speaker. I know that this is an emotional debate for them as well, Mr. Speaker, and it's this is Mr. Speaker, I don't know if it's a matter of timing or whatever the case may be, but to bring this forth now, in my opinion, is just, I don't know why it's happening. Why now? Why now so bad? I don't know.
Right here, right now.
But, Mr. Speaker, again, I suggest to you that, you know, I don't know. There's some silly arguments that I've had put forward to me, Mr. Speaker, and they've been everything from, well, you know, it will look better. Here's one argument. It will look better on the letterhead. You know, it won't take up as much room on the letterhead if they say Breton University.
Even the guy who said the dog.
Now that, Mr. Speaker, was entirely... That's even too silly to come from the NDP, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest. But the fact that the negative feedback, Mr. Speaker, the negative feedback that now exists from this change, as silly as it may be to some, and as I've said, and I'll state it again, it certainly is not silly to me. No. It's not silly in any way, shape, or form that we're talking about this name change. But as silly as it may be to some, there's been a negative feedback about this that's come in great numbers, and it continues to build. Let me give you an example of that back home right now. A former professor of UCCB is quoted in the paper back home as urging a fight against this bill. His name is Charles McDonald. He's a former professor at UCCB. No, and he's trying to give, his name is Charles McDonald, Mr. Speaker, and he's trying to give what he called the voice of anger and upset of many ordinary Cape Bretoners, people who have had a long-term association with the university, trying to give them a voice and trying to get them heard, Mr. Speaker. Now, I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that that's exactly where we come into play. Where we come into play. At some point, Mr. Speaker, at some point, it's our duty as legislators in this province that we have to make sure that people in Cape Breton who are most affected by this change are given the opportunity to speak for or against this change, Mr. Speaker. And of course, as you know, in the legislative process, that's what happens usually when a bill ends up before the Law Amendments Committee. So I've been quoted, Mr. Speaker, I've been quoted in the paper today as suggesting that I would appear if this bill does get to the Law Amendment stage, Mr. Speaker, and I personally hope that it doesn't get there. I hope that, as I said, this bill is out the window before it ever gets to the Law Amendment stage. But if it does get to the Law Amendment stage, Mr. Speaker, let me serve notice right now that I, Mr. Speaker, will be moving a motion at Law Amendments.
Oh, you're going to let it go to Law Amendments?
If it does get there. And I will move a motion to the effect that the Law Amendments Committee of this legislature, Mr. Speaker, hold hearings in Sydney
road trip.
So that the voice of Cape Bretoners can be heard on this issue, Mr. Speaker. And I'm hoping that my legislative colleagues will join with me in supporting that motion when it does come forward, Mr. Speaker. I think this matter is of enough importance that we could at least do that, we at least could make sure that the community at large is given the opportunity. And we all know what happens sometimes at law amendments. It is a huge challenge for people in this province to travel for 4.5 hours to get to a legislative committee hearing in Sydney. Unless you live in the metro area, then it's a huge challenge to get here. So I'm thinking that if we could do that, Mr. Speaker, if we could, Mr. Speaker, if we could do that, it certainly would give the people of Cape Breton the voice that they're looking for and a say in what's happening here with their university and the name change that's being proposed for their university, Mr. Speaker. As I said, I think it would be a sign of goodwill if this legislature made sure that there was a thorough and adequate airing, public airing of this matter before the Legislative Law Amendments Committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said, I know that this matter is now before the Legislative Assembly, and I know that it has become a very emotionally charged matter. And I guess I'm at fault to some extent there of letting it become too emotional sometimes with me. And if there is such a thing as my colleague from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage is saying that I'm being too honest, if there is such a thing, if there is such a thing as a politician being too honest, I stand as an example, Mr. Speaker. I stand as an example.
Those are the two words we don't use here. Let me be honest or let me be frank.
Mr. Speaker, again, this is a matter that I take with a great deal of personal pride, and I at times, Mr. Speaker, I have a lot more to say on this matter, Mr. Speaker, and I at some point in time, I'm sure we all do feel that at some point in time you should sit back and maybe, think about this for a minute and give it serious consideration, and don't let emotions charge your entire battery or whatever the case may be. But in this case, Mr. Speaker, I can't honestly say that I'm letting that do that, because when the name was first proposed and I heard it on the radio station back home, Mr. Speaker, I sat back and I said, I can't honestly believe that this is happening. I can't believe that a group of people would get together and want to remove the name Cape Breton from anything attached to Cape Breton Island. And I can't believe for a minute that some of the people who sit in this House, some are cabinet ministers who represent Cape Breton, some are MLAs who represent Cape Breton from the Democratic Party, MLAs who represent Cape Breton from the Liberal Party as well. I can't believe, Mr. Speaker, to be truthfully and brutally honest, and to be frank, that some are going to say, well, it doesn't matter. It does matter, Mr. Speaker. It matters to each and every Cape Bretoner back home as to what that institution is named, and some are in favor of it. I'm not saying that there's not. And I've also received a couple of emails from people who are in favor of the name change. But I have received an overwhelming amount of mail and faxes and phone calls and just comments in person that say, Mr. Speaker, if the NDP wants to get in on this, then stand up and be counted, because the last thing I heard them say was that they are for the name change to Breton University and they don't care about Cape Breton. And we know that, Mr. Speaker. We already know that. Let the Cape Breton members from the NDP stand up and be counted, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition on point of order.
Thank you. I appreciate the increase in title. Yeah, can I get my paycheck increased as well? No. In all seriousness, no, though, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, the member from Glace Bay, we've been very patiently sitting here listening to him. We have people who are lined up to speak as well. But I think it's important that when he suggested that our party does not care about Cape Breton, I want to put on the record that is absolutely false. And the rhetoric that he is trying to put into this speech, I wish he would focus it on this bill, on the question of this name. No one in this House can be accused of not caring about Cape Breton, and this member needs to know that as well.
Order. Recognize the honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reply to my friend and colleague from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, if he wants to participate in this debate, he should spend more time listening instead of heckling me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said, the New Democratic Party doesn't care about the University College of Cape Breton or about the name change which is happening here. Otherwise, they wouldn't be supporting this bill, Mr. Speaker. That's my opinion. I'm entitled to that opinion. That's why we're here to debate this, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I have much more to say, and I'm sure that the people of Cape Breton have much more to say to this Legislative Assembly, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from them in great numbers. And Mr. Speaker, I still shake my head in disbelief when I find myself standing here talking about the fact that we are about to do dishonor to the island of Cape Breton, that we are about to forget about the heritage and history of my island, Mr. Speaker, and that my fellow colleagues here in this Legislative Assembly are fully aware of the fact of what a great history that island has, and what a great history the University College of Cape Breton has. To go from its inception, first of all, as Little X, and its attachment with St. FX University, then to go on becoming the College of Cape Breton. And the amount of time and effort and the hearts and the blood, sweat, and tears that were poured into forming that university. And to have such a great institution come to the point where we would simply entertain changing a name only for the sake of perhaps making it a little easier to market offside the island. Mr. Speaker, as I've suggested and as I've said in this legislature, it's easy to market Cape Breton. Just say it like it is. Just tell it like it is. We're proud, we're honorable people. What's hard to market about that? Proud, honorable, hardworking, honest, trustworthy people, Cape Bretoners, who take a great deal of pride in our university, which we want to remain named as our university, which we want to carry a label that will tell everybody in the world that it's our university and that it's located in Cape Breton. How could anybody argue with that, Mr. Speaker? How could anybody possibly argue with that? And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would now move that we adjourn debate for the day.
Motion.
Adjourn debate, on this bill.
Motion is to adjourn debate on Bill number 97. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, if any? Bill carried. Motion carried. Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call the order of business private and local bills for second reading?
Order of business private and local bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 85, the Legion, Houston Property and Tatamagouche Act?
Bill number 85. Recognize the honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you very much, and I won't take long on this bill. This is a local bill involving the Royal Canadian Legion and the Houston property in Tatamagouche. What it is, the Legion needs 10 feet by 30 feet property, and it's supported both by the Colchester municipal government and also by the Village of Tatamagouche Commission. And everybody's in favor of it, and with that, I'd move second reading of this bill.
Motion is for second reading on Bill 85. Any interventions? Questions been called? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion is carried.
Bill 85, entitled An Act Respecting the Royal Canadian Legion and Philip Houston property in Tatamagouche.
The order of this bill will be referred to the Committee on the Law Amendments. Oh, order. Pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. It is going indeed to the Private and Local Bills Committee. Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill 108, the Chester Yacht Club Act?
Bill has been called. The honourable member for Chester, St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd very much like to move the bill on 108, the Chester Yacht Club bill. Basically, that's true. The opposition said that, but the bill, the discussion of that bill is after us. But whatever. Long story short, it's a bill that's a housekeeping bill, and it's been requested by the yacht club. This yacht club, by the way, is it was founded in 1902. So this is 102nd year of existence, and it's a housekeeping bill that they very much need to do renovations to the bill, to their property, etc. And I'd like to move second reading of this bill. Thank you very much.
Motion is for second reading on Bill number 108. Is it agreed? All those in favor? Go ahead, Clerk. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried.
Bill 108, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 122 of the Acts of 1926, an act to incorporate the Chester Yacht Club.
Order of this bill be moved to the Committee on Private and Local Bills. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call the order of business private members' public bills for second reading? Okay. Private members' bills for public...
Private member bills for second reading.
Private members' public bills.
Private members' public bills for second reading.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 96, the House of Assembly Act?
Bill number 96, the House of Assembly Act. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a very short bill in its content, but very large in substance. It will have long-term and lasting implications for all members of this House and for the operation of the House. In short, Mr. Speaker, what this does, it formalizes what is generally considered a constitutional right and a legal right that has been bestowed on the provinces of Canada and other jurisdictions, the right of provincial committees of the legislature and the legislature to be able to require witnesses from other jurisdictions, in particular the federal government, to appear before the legislature as the need befits the essence of the provincial need. As well, Mr. Speaker, this is an issue that came up before Public Accounts some 4 years ago and was given the full approbation by all three caucuses to enable committees of the legislature to be able to require witnesses to appear before committees of the legislature, even though they had that legal and constitutional right. There was some ambiguity in the way the act was written, and what this does, it clarifies it and formalizes this process. I would like to commend the representatives from the other two caucuses who, in large measure, have as equal claim to this particular piece of legislation as any member of the Liberal caucus. It's for those who sat on the committee at that particular point in time 4 years ago, they certainly understand the need for this. On so many occasions, Mr. Speaker, we've seen the invitation sent out to witnesses from the federal jurisdiction in particular, only to find that they would respond that they were going to attend and not attend without any given notice, or not simply respond, or simply respond indicating that they didn't feel the need to appear. So this certainly in some way helps to address that. As well, Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, this issue was again raised at the national body of public accounts conferences in Winnipeg, of which I know my colleague from Pictou East and the member for Dartmouth South, Dartmouth Portland Valley, was in attendance as well. And they too can attest to the strong support and the ratification that was provided, and certainly they made substantial contribution to this, as well as I know other members of the NDP and the Conservative caucus who have attended these conferences and these committee meetings. So, Mr. Speaker, although my name may be on the bill, it may be coming from this corner of the legislature, but I can certainly attest to the fact that all members of the legislature, and particularly those who are involved at the committee level, deserve equal and full credit for recognizing this housekeeping measure should be included into the House of Assembly Act to provide for greater clarity. The Supreme Court decision of Prince Edward Island with regards to the potato blight industry that the provincial committee of the legislature wanted to examine many issues surrounding that particular issue. That was a cost-shared program between the federal and provincial governments. The federal government just thought it would thumb its nose at the provincial jurisdiction, only to find that the Supreme Court of Prince Edward Island had indeed confirmed the right of the committee of the legislature, and indeed the legislature, to be able to require interested parties from other jurisdictions to appear and give testimony on matters that affected that provincial jurisdiction. For example, Mr. Speaker, several years ago, I believe it was it Mac Timber, I believe we had before Public Accounts here, and we had considerable testimony given by the Department of Economic Development here, but we really couldn't get the full story because the federal agency, ACOA, refused to participate whatsoever, and many questions were left as to whether and why we did not receive true value for dollar on that particular issue. And it was totally unfair to all the businesses that found themselves in considerable difficulty in this particular issue, because the province could only do so much and give so much information, but in fact the feds just kind of sat off into the sidelines and really didn't accept its fiduciary responsibility. So I believe this is a very substantial measure, Mr. Speaker, that will be a very positive for many years to come in all members of the legislature, both present and future, and I so move.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to speak briefly to this bill. I'm particularly interested in it as the chair of the legislature's Public Accounts Committee. I have to say, first of all, let me compliment the member for Cape Breton West for bringing this bill forward. I felt the need to say that before I say what I'm going to say next, which is that the member claims that the bill accomplishes a certain thing, which it doesn't, of course, accomplish at all, because any of the members who read the bill introduced by the member can read what's there and say, well, how does it do what the member says it does? Because the member for Cape Breton West has always pitched this bill as something that will allow us to summon federal civil servants before committees of the legislature. It doesn't actually do that. It doesn't say that. And if you don't have the constitutional power to summon federal officials already, you can't, just by passing a piece of legislation, give yourself the power. So either this legislature does have the power already, or it doesn't. And I think the one thing that's true is that that question has been a matter of some debate and controversy, and finally, thanks to our colleagues in Prince Edward Island, they seem to have established once and for all through the court process that a provincial legislature does indeed constitutionally have the power to compel the attendance of federal officials, not just to ask them to attend or have them appear if they want to appear voluntarily, but compel them to appear even if they don't want to. Now, this is of some interest to us in Nova Scotia because over the years a number of issues have come up, and the member for Cape Breton West has referred to some of them. I remember in particular the very great interest that members of this House have had in questioning representatives of ACOA. I remember an issue came up over the Yarmouth Airport where we wanted to hear from officials from Transport Canada. And most recently in the Public Accounts Committee, the issue has come up about whether we can compel the attendance of officials from Revenue Canada. And the reason that's such an important issue is one of the major revenue earners for our provincial government, of course, is the HST, the Harmonized Sales Tax, which is collected by Revenue Canada, federal agencies. So whenever we ask the Provincial Department of Finance to answer our questions about HST, they say, oh, it's not up to us, we don't collect it. Ask Revenue Canada. And Revenue Canada says, oh, we're a federal agency, we don't have to tell you. Or they say it's confidential, we don't have to tell you. And this is, needless to say, somewhat frustrating when you consider that this HST is worth over $1 billion to Nova Scotia, or close to $1 billion. It's like $1 billion of revenue, and we can't get any straight answers about how it's collected. So this is why the Public Accounts Committee has been pushing this issue about getting Revenue Canada to appear. And right now, for your information, Mr. Speaker, I think it'll be of some interest to members of the House that where that issue currently stands is Revenue Canada has said that they will appear voluntarily, but they want the meeting to be in camera. Okay. And of course, I have some little difficulty with the idea of anybody appearing before the Public Accounts Committee in camera, because the very point of an in-camera meeting is that you can't use that or quote that in any way outside the hearing. So we'd have 9 members who might get some answers, but they couldn't tell anybody what they were or use it in any way. So we're still negotiating, well, negotiating may be too strong a word. We're still in discussion with Revenue Canada about the terms under which they'll appear. But when push comes to shove, at the end of the day, the only real hammer that the committee has is to be able to say to Revenue Canada, whether you want to appear or not, we're going to compel you to appear. and it appears that now we have this power. What the bill before us actually does is it simply changes the process by which subpoenas are issued. It doesn't say a thing about summoning federal officials. And I would say, with respect to the member for Cape Breton West, that if that's what his bill set out to accomplish, that's not what it actually does. Having said all this, Mr. Speaker, we don't have the least difficulty supporting it, certainly on second reading. We'll have to have some discussion in our caucus to see after that. But on second reading, we don't have the least discussion, because anything that facilitates the operation of a committee of this House, we're all for. So with that express support for the bill, but with the caveat that we don't think it really accomplishes what the member for Cape Breton West says that it accomplishes. We'll be happy to support this, and we certainly would encourage the government House Leader and the government side to bring this bill forward so that it might pass through the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Cape Breton West, to close debate on Bill number 96.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly acknowledge the points that have been made by the member for Halifax Fairview, but I think he's also indicated that every initiative here is a step forward to bringing us closer to the realization of what we've been hoping for some time, and this is a measure that certainly brings us there, so I so move.
Motion is for second reading of Bill number 96. The House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried.
Entitled, An Act to Amend Chapter 1, 1992 Supplement of the Revised Statutes 1989, the House of Assembly Act.
Bill referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, it's been quite an interesting week, and I move now that the House to rise to meet again on Monday at the hour of 2 p.m. The House will sit from 2 until 10 p.m. The order of business generally, Mr. Speaker, will be public bills for second reading. We'll be dealing with Bill 109, the Mental Health Act, and we'll be dealing with the bill introduced today, the Emergency Health Services Act, and we will be dealing with the bill that was stood today, the Breton University Act, or whatever title we've given, the University College of Cape Breton Act. And, Mr. Speaker, we'll deal with those bills. We may also be dealing with some other bills, Mr. Speaker, that are on the order paper, but and were introduced today. I don't have the numbers for them, but some of those may possibly be called on Monday. So, Mr. Speaker, without further ado, I move the House to now rise. Thank you.
Motion is the House adjourned to 2 p.m. on Monday. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The House is adjourned until 2 p.m. Monday.